because if you want to get past the open micer stage, you have to begin to figure out, like, why am I funny to this crowd? Why do they want to hear what I have to say? How can they relate to it? And will they want to hear more?
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front for the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lucas.
Mike, I wanted to start the discussion with a kind of conversation we had the other day when I asked you why I had such a hard time following open micers sets.
One of the things that a lot of these newer, why you're not following a lot of these open micers, like you're saying, they don't have their clear comedy lens yet. And they don't have, when you don't have a clear comedy lens, you don't have a point to why you're doing your act. A clear comedy lens says, here's who I am. Here's why I'm funny. Therefore, here's why I'm here tonight to tell you this stuff. And so, you know, in each comedy, a comedian is different. And the more successful you are as a comedian, I would argue the more clear your lens is, even if you've never spoke it out loud, even if they're not conscious of it themselves, through their organic humor, they have developed a lens that you recognize immediately. And it's like Jerry Seinfeld says, if you want to imitate it, it's imitatable because it's that clear, because it's a lens that's gone from just being, here's how I look at the world, to also here's how I present my thoughts and takes. You know, so it's physical, it's verbal, it's visual, you know, and it's the humor blueprint, how they, because that's the thing about your comedy lens, depending on how you look at the world of, you know, through that lens, I say the comedy lens is sort of like your personal organic sort of porthole that you look at through to get your humor. Then the more clear you are on that, then the more you understand how to begin to get your takes. So you look at a subject like, say, divorce. Well, if you just go, why is divorce funny? If you're just like what I call a corner quipper, which is just a generic funny guy, you know, hey, divorce, here's the thing. And then you go like rattle off 15 jokes about divorce. You might get laughs on those, but it's not as funny as the guy who's like, man, I'm single and I'm afraid of meeting a woman I'm going to divorce, or I've been divorced and here's what life is like, or I'm about to get divorced and I'm scared to death of anything that causes confrontation. You know, those are like some pretty clear comedy lenses that you could adapt as a comedian, which is, you know, those are very specific though. Like those might be a little limiting, but, you know, they might lend themselves to a more broader comedy lens, you know, which it might be, you know, the sarcastic relationship crasher, you know, or something where everything you do is about, I try to connect and I ruin it. You know, that might be your through line. So anyway, it's really what you're seeing is a lot of these open micers are going out there and they're kind of like comedy quippers. They're just people who are just trying to learn how to be funny, but not really knowing yet how to be funny for themselves, like to find their authentic comedy take, so that we can, because what that does is when you find that out and then we see it through your material as an audience, now we remember you, now we relate to you, now you're the blah blah guy or the blah blah girls, and that your lens begins to be memorable to them. Like, I want to see more of the blah blah guy, I like that blah blah stuff, I really relate to that, you know.
What's your comedy lens?
Mine, it's funny. In the book, I go through my journey of comedy. Because in the beginning, I kind of knew I had a mentor, which was this woman, Vicki Rousman in Orlando, Florida, and she sort of said, you know, you got to kind of know, you have to have sort of a brand or like a comedy take, like who are you, you know. And so she didn't really never called it a comedy lens, but you know, I sort of dubbed it that later. But when I was with her, the thing I thought of first to be cute, maybe because I couldn't think of a better one, was the pale guy from Florida, because I was pale, I was a guy, and I was living in Florida. And so there was like sort of, I was trying to be sort of, I don't know, not really ironic, but sort of I don't know, cute, funny, but yet, and I had business cards made up that said pale guy from Florida. And it was really the reason why it wasn't a good comedy lens is because it doesn't tell the audience anything that they couldn't get on their own by just looking at me. It doesn't help me to hone down material. You know, I can do maybe some material about being pale and being a guy and being in Florida. But then, like, like why do we care what that guy thinks about relationships and that guy thinks about, it's like it's a kind of a boring lens because it's very specific. Like how many pale guys are going to be in my audience, that are going to be like, yeah, I'm like that, or my husband's so pale, like it's just kind of it's not that strong. I mean, you could use that, and I bet you that someone who's really clever and funny could make that work. But then I think they'd want more, eventually, and it would have to broaden it. So, which is what I did, and very quickly I then became the tall bald comic. So I didn't learn my lesson, and again gave the audience something that they could just guess at by looking at me, and it didn't really help my ability to hone down material or give myself a take, because now it's just, oh, how does a tall bald guy think about relationships or the mall, or you gotta look out for those doorways because when you're tall and bald you really can see the scars or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but it's limited, to how people can relate to it. So eventually what I began to figure out when I went back in retrospect when I was writing my book, and I wanted to really see what a clear lens would be for me, by then I was beginning to I've never been diagnosed as being autistic or having Asperger's syndrome, but I have been accused often by my wife of being an Aspie, which is they call it Asperger's. And then when I began to do a little research, she's ADHD, she's diagnosed ADHD. And then she sort of brought to light that I could be this sort of Aspie thing, which is, I began to do a little research and I was like, oh my God, I really do identify. These are my people. And there's a real functional quality to Aspies without getting into all the detail, but there's a very like a problem solving, but like a very we're focused on one thing. Our emotions, we have like maybe like if there's like most people have say 64 emotional crayons in their box, we might have 5 or 10, like the big kindergarten version. And most of them are red. What the hell? And and then there's what I began to dub as an Aspie hole, because there's people who are unaware that they're Aspie, and an Aspie hole I think is something that is out there. I don't think it's like I didn't invent it. I don't want to Peggy Hill that thing, like as I like to call an Aspie hole, but I really identify with that version of it, which is an unaware person who's sort of like blurts out, like I always say, I interject and correct, and then I notice and notify. I I analyze and strategize. So my wife has sort of pointed out that I do all those things, a lot of unsolicited information to people based on things that have bothered me and I see. And so that's sort of like what an Aspie hole is. But then I'm a clumsy Aspie hole because I like it always backfires on me. I try to hold the world up to this real high level of standard, and I can't do it myself. And so my comedy basically comes from that my sort of weaseling out of being that good that I expect the world to be, and then I'm always upset with the world, but then yet here I am doing the same damn thing. So that's sort of so I'm the clumsy Aspie hole. So that's in a nutshell my lens. And when I went back and looked at all the best bits I did from my 24-year career, all the ones that really killed and sort of I could identify, like that really I like were personal to me. They all had that lens. They were all using that organically, that lens, and they were always something where I was like trying to do this thing, but then it backfired into that thing, and that was where the funny was.
You think that's because people can identify with you a lot easier? Like you've
Yeah.
now grabbed a lot more of the audience.
Absolutely, because it's like that lens, for instance. A lot of people are becoming more aware of how they're wired. And so the idea of understanding someone who's an Aspie hole, it's funny because as soon as you explain it a little bit, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know that guy. That's my husband. That's my wife. That's my roommate. That's the guy I work with. And there's always, and even if you look at popular culture, like if you look at The Office, Dwight Schrute is you could peg him as an Aspie hole. You look at what's the one with the physicists,
Big Bang Theory or
Big
Sheldon.
Bang Theory. Sheldon is like you definitely could accuse him of being an Aspie hole. And the whole thing about an Aspie hole is like you can zoom out and go, well, you know what, he's right. You could always, well, he's right. So I even have done I did the on my website funnymuscle.com. I've done 3 different comedy videos about the clumsy Aspie hole, and the whole tagline is sometimes our version of how things went aren't exactly what other people kind of felt. There's a better phrasing of it, but so I do like a trip to the grocery store, and I have me talking about my trip to the grocery store, how it was great. It was like, it was just typical, it was normal. And then I do the characters of the people at the grocery store, like, oh my God, this guy's an idiot. This guy was like, he was trying to tell the guy how to bag the stuff, and he kept saying heavy stuff on the bottom. He knows that, he's trained, and then then I go back to me, just like, oh, I went to the parking lot, I talked to the security guard. He was yelling at the security guard saying, you should work on the traffic. He's like, I don't do traffic, I should do security. So then the other one is I do one about the pharmacist, where I call the pharmacy to get a re-up on my prescription, and then I do the guy who's on the phone, who's like a real polite dude, and I'm just like, yeah, I just call him up, and it's really easy. The guys are real helpful. And this guy's like, he just kept calling me ma'am. And I'm like, I'm not a ma'am, I'm a sir. I identify as a sir. And he just insisted that I wasn't, and I'm like, so then it's back and forth. And then the third one I did was me driving to my doctor's appointment. And then it was a guy, this guy, he's driving, he's a bike carrier. And he's like, this guy, he's not a good driver. He's not safe. He kept saying, you go. I'm like, your light is green. It's not, so there's all these perceptions of how I think it went, and then how it really went. And so that's sort of the humor of that lens.
Sounds a lot like what's John Goodman's character in The Big Lebowski, when he says like,
Yeah, he's
"Am
an
I
ass.
wrong?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong?" And
Am
he's
I
like,
wrong?
I think,
Am I the only one who? Yeah. Shut up,
yeah,
Donnie.
I think he says, "You're not wrong. You're an asshole." I think this is what
Exactly.
Jeff Bridges'
Exactly.
character, right?
That's a great one. That's a great Aspie Hole saying. Credo. I'm not wrong. I'm an asshole, but I'm not wrong. Yeah. So
If you're doing 5 minutes, say you have a 5 minute set, how do you establish your lens? Do you set it up right away? Like say you if an audience that doesn't know you yet, you don't have a following yet, you don't have your second season
right.
of your sitcom, so no one knows you.
It's all about like what kind of, like, your 5 minute audition set, like its purpose in the beginning especially is an audition set. So it's 5 minutes that showcase who you are to an audience, but also to a club owner and a club booker, so that they can see. So when you go do a guest spot, you pop that set up there and they go, oh, he's the blog guy, I get it. So it's real important that your audition set has that lens reflected in it. And how do you do that? Well, you really begin to, in my book, I use like the humor blueprint, which is basically like your premise, setup, punchline formula with the comedy lens added in, and then the heightening devices poked in there, so you can sort of see how the whole thing works. And it's sort of like I say it's like a muscle flex over and over again when you put it through that. And that's what gets them to laugh. The laughter comes from, you set them up to think one thing, and then you gave them the other thing, and then they get that they both equal each other. And when they get that, there's a laughter, there's a joyful reaction to that connection that you made for them. And there's a million ways to describe why people laugh, so that's just one of many. But yeah, so in your first 5 minutes, you have to begin like that. That's why you have to begin to, first of all, identify what your comedy lens is. And in my book, I have 4 questions that you ask yourself and answer in detail. And then from that, you cherry pick sort of adjectives and nouns that sort of begin to describe you, and describe your humor. And then you slowly begin to work those, fill in the blank kind of thing, to begin to see like which one. And your comedy lens, whatever the first one is you decide, you can change that. It evolves. Like, look at me. I'm on my 3rd comedy lens, and who knows if I'll keep this one, and if I'll discover more about who I am as I move forward. But you have to have something to start. And that's why those open micers in their 5 minute set were all over the place, because they haven't figured out their lens yet. They're just trying to figure out how to be funny, which is good. That's the job. But the next job after being funny is being funny for, like, who are you? Why are you funny? And that's what the lens does. And so you begin to apply that lens to your takes, and then you don't have to say your comedy lens. Like, very few people say, I'm a wild and crazy guy. Like, that's his lens, but he's one of the few that says it. Most people don't say it. It just comes out. Jerry Seinfeld never says, boy, I just take, nothing and I make it into a big deal, because that would ruin it if he said that. So you gather that after a while, that's what he does and who he is. And you know that from his first 2 bits, because each one of those is done with that lens in mind. So that's to me how I would begin to, I would learn what my lens is first, if I was starting off of a new 5 minute set. I would be really solid on what my lens is, at least for right now. And then I would learn how to write a joke. I would learn the way to take my ideas. Like okay, I want, like I just got divorced with my wife. I want to make that. I want to be that's what I really want to talk about right now. It's really on my mind. I really want to find humor in it. So you go, okay, cool. So what's your lens? You apply it to that premise. And then, there's going to be different, your lens is going to look at that premise differently than my lens does. I do that in the book. In book 2, I take 3 different lenses, including my own and a comedy quipper. And I take one particular premise and I show you how I do each one of those would come up with a different idea for that same premise. And that's the great thing about having a comedy lens is there's only so many premises. There's only so many love songs you can sing. So then your lens makes that your love song. That makes your joke. And it really pegs that premise onto an original take for you. And then when you add your original style, how you deliver it, and boy, that really makes you stand out. And nowadays there's like a million comics. So if you don't have this, you're really just you're not gonna stand out at auditions. You're not going to get, when there's 10 guys vying and girls vying for 2 5-minute sets and they're going up on a Sunday afternoon in front of the owner. If you don't have that 5-minute set peg that shows who you are, you're not going to be one of the ones chosen. They're going to choose the ones that, oh, I know that guy, that my audience is going to love you. You're the disgruntled housewife. Oh, fuck, we need one of those. Or you're the angry salesman, who's out for glory or whatever. I got that. Haha, I like that.
Is that sometimes I hear the term persona, or hear the term like blind spot. Is the blind spot the same as the comedy lens?
I the first thing I thought of is my wife accusing me of not seeing something about myself
Yeah, I
that
think that's
is
exactly
causing
how they
us to
use it.
fight all the time. and so as soon as you said that, I was like, "There's nothing funny about that, Stifler. Put up your dukes."
It's similar to, I mean, they take
Okay,
Seinfeld.
yeah,
Seinfeld's the guy who notices the minutia, but he never understands that pointing out the minutia is trivial.
yeah.
It's
Okay,
a
I see what you mean. Like that. That's a blind spot, like where he pretends like he doesn't see it. Yeah, and your lens, I think in all comedy, I think and I just helped it. One of the guys I'm coaching, I was like, I think you're enjoying your own comedy too much. I think you're letting the audience off. You're coming up short, giving them the gift of a persona, because when you sort of grin and smile at your own jokes, you end up. I think you end up like, it's almost like when an actor looks at the camera and except for The Office, it doesn't work. Like you can't do that. Like what you're giving to an audience is a thing that you're presenting. Like if it's a movie, it's a movie, and you don't want the actors to look at you. You want it to be a thing that you're watching, and being like a fly in the wall on. And it's the same with a comedy show. Like you're getting like Jerry Seinfeld. If he goes meta and makes fun of himself, like especially in the beginning, he wouldn't do that because it's like going, it's like blowing his cover. Like, and maybe that's what the blind spot is you have to sell that blind spot your act is delivering. And I buy that. If that's what that means, I really like that because that like the idea of like giggling at your own joke. It's like your act isn't for you to enjoy, dude. Your act isn't for you to enjoy. It's for them to enjoy. And if you enjoy it, they're not going to enjoy it. It's not as funny to them while you're enjoying it. That's why like when remember Pete on the SNL, what's his name,
Davidson.
Pete Davidson. In the very beginning, he was having a real difficulty keeping a straight face, and same with Raj, Horatio Sands, and that whole troupe with Jimmy Fallon, and it was fun. It's fun to watch people break, but like that's why in Friends you never watch them break. Like that never makes the final cut because it's funny in the moment, but it's not really funny because it breaks the reality of what you're trying to do. And so now Pete Davidson, he's become a really good actor and he's become a really funny guy because he learned that. Someone must have told him, hey, dude, you stop doing that. And then he did. And then all of a sudden now he sells the character that he's really, his comedy lens is pushing. And I think, kudos to him for doing that. That was, I really respect him for figuring that out. Because that's, a lot of guys don't figure that out. A lot of women don't figure that out. Like Amy Schumer figured that out. And she's like, she can't admit that part of her or the joke's over. You know what I mean? That the joke's over, the joke's done. If Lucille Ball finally goes, boy, am I clumsy, I can't get shit done. Like the joke's over. Every time she's got to be like, oh no, I can do this. I got the skills it takes to get this done. And then, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh no, you don't.
I think I big professional wrestling fan. So like
Yeah,
the term is kayfabe, right? That you break the kayfabe, you break, and then suddenly you lose your audience. Like people know wrestling's
right.
fake, but once you
Break the
have
magic.
admitted it or miss a punch by 3 feet and still sell it, then
Yeah,
you suddenly like they want to be suspended, yeah, or
the
suspended, whatever. Like
disbelief
they
being
want to,
suspended. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
What's it called? Breaking the what? Kayfabe?
I think the word is kayfabe in the pro wrestling world.
Like
K
how do you
F A
spell
B
that?
E. I think it's K
Kafabe.
F A B E.
Interesting. I like that.
But I think about that like all the time, like even developing like your character as a professional wrestler. Like they
Yeah,
said, like how many like the pro wrestling promo is all about like I'm gonna smash you, I'm gonna beat you up, and no one believes it because it's not their true character.
right.
So is it the same with comedy lens? Like when I was trying to develop my character for professional wrestling, it was you got to take something real about yourself and heighten it because being
Right.
your true self is going to be a lot easier than 100% being an actor
But
the
that, I
whole
mean, but
time.
you just said exactly what the comedy lens is. It's something that you know that's real about yourself that affects why you think the world is funny. It's sort of like because I think when we're funny, we're covering over awkward moments. We're covering over a lot of struggles. Like instead of getting mad, I want to make a joke. Instead of getting frustrated, I want to make a joke. Instead of wanting to punch you, I want to make everyone else laugh at you, and that's more satisfying and results in less incarcerations than a blow, you know. And so that's sort of what again, what's what the jester was supposed to do is to make the king inform the king without getting killed, you know, with bad news by making them laugh, you know. Yeah, so that I just looked it up. That kayfabe is great. It says the fact or convention of presenting stage performances as genuine or authentic, and that there really is a kayfabe element to the stand-up comedy, and that comedy lens, like with this wrestler, like you said, you have to pick the part of you that stands out when you walk on stage and you begin to be funny. There's a flavor to that, there's a style to that, there's a angle to that. If you really do, so that's the thing about being a comedian, man. You got to really do a lot of self-evolution. You got to really do it like look at yourself. Who am I? Why? Because if you want to get past the open micer stage, you have to begin to figure out like, why am I funny to this crowd? Why do they want to hear what I have to say? How can they relate to it? And will they want to hear more? And then that leads you to be in a middle act. And then you have to say, well, what theme am I trying to present in an hour-long special? And then when you begin to develop that, that's when you begin to get headliner gigs and begin to sell that type of show. And then you have to begin to go, this year, what new theme am I going to put across using my same lens? Or is my lens evolving because I got married and I have kids now, or I got divorced and I suddenly got diabetes and I have no legs. And so now I have a different lens that I'm looking at. I'm struggling in a different way. So my humor is coming out, but it's still me. And so, you know, a really good lens lasts through all that.
It sounds like therapy or like some
It
self-reflection
really is.
or like I think I highlighted the word vulnerable. I think you used the
Yeah.
word vulnerable in the
Yeah.
first couple chapters.
I did because it really is. It's like stuff you wouldn't ever admit in an elevator full of strangers. Yet comedians have to cop to that and admit that and make fun of that and be okay when other people make fun of it and point it out too. Do you ever watch a roast? It's brutal, but typically everything everyone says was like, you know, it's true, you know, but it's brutal. And even if your comedy's not that way, comedy takes the piss out of something or someone. And even if you're punching up, you still have to have the ability to know who you are and know who the things above you that are causing that struggle that you can begin to mock to feel better about it. And I always say like you can't make fun of special needs kids in the little yellow bus. That's not cool. That's punching down. They already have it, you know, tough enough. In fact, you know, you look like a real loser if you make fun of them. So if you want to do a joke about that, you know, punch up, you know, make fun of the people who designed that little yellow bus and made those kids sit in a bus that looks like it has special needs. It's funnier because you know, you can tell by the way you rolled over laughing and stood up and applauded. Is No, you laugh like a comedian laughs. You're like, oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that. That's funny. Huh. Mm-hmm. But that's like, you know, just an example of why, you know, like punching up and punching down. And then punching sideways would be if you're the kid in the little yellow bus and you're making fun of being there. then you can punch sideways. Like that's me. I'm that kid. I'm the, I'm special needs. But you better have something wrong with your voice, the way you speak. You gotta have a limp. You better be in a wheelchair, or have crutches or something, because if you don't, now you're punching down and
That's kind of
right. It's like that guy who parks in the handicap spot and he's got the placard, but he's walking to the, to the wall. Like, motherfucker,
he's
that's not
mad.
for you. That's not for you. It's for the
Yeah.
people who can't do that. You oh, I got the card.
I'm struck by like the vulnerability thing. Like, you ever listen to Moth podcast or Moth storytelling, or go to like a story hour? Like, they have them in Denver here, the Moth story hour, and like everyone tells a 5 minute story, right? You get your name pulled from a hat, tell a 5 minute story. And I was struck at how big a laughs these storytellers were getting. And they're like, this is much funnier than open mic. And these guys aren't trying to be funny, but they're so vulnerable. They're telling a story about, their disability, or they're telling a story about losing a child.
Right.
And then suddenly they're facing the wrong way and with a microphone and telling 300 people. It's like, I felt like if you're in a vulnerability stage, you get easier hurdle to get huge laughs, or what?
Absolutely. Well, because laughter is really, you're causing some tension and then you're releasing it. Like the tension is the setup. I'm setting up something that makes you go, wait, what? Where are you going with this? I think I know where you're going with this, and then you release that tension with a different punchline, some like a connection that goes in it from a different point. So these vulnerable moments, when you tell something about yourself that's more vulnerable, or and that doesn't mean you have to like reveal all your darkest secrets, but just more like something about yourself that shows it, like I get it, I'm just as funny as everyone else, and just as goofy and just as mockable as everyone else. And it also says even someone like Lewis Black, Lewis Black doesn't say I'm an idiot. Lewis Black tells us something about himself, though. He has a low tolerance for idiots, and so that tells us something about him. He has a hard time not being outwardly angry about the things that piss us off too. And so we love it because we have to control ourselves. We can't have outbursts, but he can, because he's on stage and he's a pro, and he does it in a way that's brilliant. And he brings light to a lot of really dark topics that make us think about it. So there's a real like double thing going on with a guy like Lewis Black, and any guys who are at that level. Yeah, vulnerability is tough because it's like if you get too vulnerable, it's not funny. It's more like dude, this isn't a 12-step program and you're up there telling us about that stuff. And that's where the
Too much
heightening
tension, or
devices
what?
come in. Yeah, the heightening devices can't. Yeah, too much tension. That's only tension. We just too much. You relieve it. And
Yeah,
that's where the
got it.
heightening devices come in. Like in my book, I have these 36 heightening devices. And these are like sort of tools that especially the pro comics, but anyone who's trying to be funny uses these to sort of bring worlds together in order to make a point about the setup that you've created. Like a good example are like the cut forward to or cut back to. So a heightening device, a cut forward to, would be you create a scenario that would result from whatever you just set up. So like I just got divorced. Cut forward to me trying to date. Because I'm that guy. Now I'm the divorce guy. Hey kid, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So I just cut forward to a scene, or cut back to the reason why I just got divorced. Me on my first date. Hey, maybe it's not so important to bring flowers, or whatever. But that's a cut forward. Those are two heightening devices, and so you can use those devices to get a laugh off your setup, and that's that will be your punchline. And when you use that heightening device, when you show them, oh, I see what he did, he cut back to a thing and it explains what he just set up, they get that, they see that connection, they laugh. And then if you heighten that and you begin to, I cut forward to that moment, and then I do like a yes and to that moment. I not only agree with that moment with my next statement, but I also make it bigger, more intense, more of whatever it is I did, more of it. That gets another laugh. And so that's called playing the game. That means I'm bringing those two worlds together again. I all of a sudden there's a different perspective. Observe the setup from an unlikely point of view. So you could do that. I'm in traffic. I hate traffic. I hate people that tailgate me. Right. So I could make that fun by going, but I know who hates it even worse. The teenager sit in the back seat of the guy who's tailgating. Oh my God, my dad's doing it again. And then, so that's a different perspective. Now I'm making fun of the guy who's tailgating me by having his daughter hate him. So that's another heightening device, right? So I would have to set that up. Boy, is it tailgating? I sure hate to be tailgated, but I get, it would be worse. And then that's the setup, and then it'd be, and then a different perspective. So there's 36 of those that you can anthropomorphizing. You can have that same thing, tailgating. What I hate it. I can't stand when someone's tailgating me. But imagine how the car feels. The front bumper of that guy's car. Oh my God, we're not going through this again. I've been through that same mechanic. I know who's going to go to. And that guy's so not gentle and whatever. You just begin to be the bumper talking. So now that's a punchline. That's a laugh. And then you heighten that. Then you do, the other bumper talking back to him, and then you do another bumper that's just driving by. I saw the whole thing, and I'm part of a truck, then you have a different voice because that, now that's a game that you're playing. And so that's why a story will get laughs, is because people begin to insert those heightening devices within their story. So I call that a flex. I call that the funny muscle flex. I say, it's not a funny bone. Bones are hard and rigid. In funnies is a muscle. It you can flex it, and it grows bigger the more you flex it and work it. And so that's where the funny muscle idea came from. And these heightening devices are ways to do that. And they're all proven. In my book, my second book, I go through all 36 of them, and I give examples of pro comics that use those. And I also take that same heightening device, and I use it against that premise that I do over and over again that I wrote. It's about my teenage daughter oversleeping in the weekend. And so then I show you how to anthropomorphize that. I show you how to do a callback. I show you how to do a contrast. I show you how to do a cut back to, cut forward to, all those things in each chapter. And so it's a cool breakdown to show you the game plan of how you can practice being funny, and then begin to use your comedy lens to make a real original take punchlines, and then you take that and you got to go to an open mic and you got to perform them, and then they might suck, but at least you have a game plan that you're working on, and then you watch that tape of you sucking and you go, oh dude, I didn't set that up. I went straight from the premise right into the punchline, and there was no misdirection there. So they didn't get the game of it. They didn't get why it was funny for me to bring those together, because it was, I was too obvious about what I was trying to do there. So there's a real, once you begin to understand this part of being a joke slinger, a joke writer, and then a joke slinger, you can really practice in front of your computer this stuff and have way better things to bring to that open mic. So now you can begin to try out material that is original to you. And now, like what you said, you go to that open mic, you start to see guys and girls have that more original takes, and then work on that part, because that's the audition, the 5-minute audition that's going to get you work, because there's a shit ton of people that are funny, but when it's funny because you're funny, it's like, I like that guy. Especially if you're like us, like we're two white guys, man. Like there's a lot of white guys doing comedy. Like what got really popular for a while is people who weren't white guys. Anything but white guys, right? And I mean, there's no offense to white guys, because I'm one. I'm a big fan, but it's not interesting. It's boring. So you have to figure out why am I'm more interesting now as a clumsy aspie hole than I ever was as a tall bald comic. Like that. Like it's just my kid's like that way, or my husband's that way. Oh, I want to hear what this guy has to say. Oh my God, he makes it funny, as opposed to it's usually pretty angry.
I like the heightening devices as far as giving me tangible homework, or more doors to open. Like I've been sitting here trying to write this joke, or it's not funny, or even just doing a story for another project. It's like, but with that, I was like, okay, let me just throw a simile at it, or let me throw
Exactly.
let's give words to the fly in the room, or let's flash forward, flash back.
Right.
And a lot of times they yield nothing, right? But at
Of
least it's
course.
like, at least you're getting,
But
at
you're
least
working
you
the
have something
muscle.
tangible to do. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
working the muscle. And I promise you, because that's what I do in the book. The book too, I go through that teen sleeper premise 36 times. And then at the end, I take, in each one I do, each heightening device, I do 3 examples. I do 3 anthropomorphizing, 3 cut forward twos, 3 different perspectives. And then out of all that material, I pull the best ones that reflect my comedy lens the most. Because a lot of them are funny, but I realize, oh, that's more like a comedy quipper kind of a joke, not a clumsy aspie hole joke. So I take all the clumsy aspie hole type ones and then ones that I think I could perform, like that are funny for me. And I've got, at the end of the book, I've got like a good 5 to 10 minute set out of that material that I showed how to, to write out the premise, setup, and punchlines of it using what I came up with, those results. And so that is, ready to do on an open mic stage. I haven't done that yet. That should be the next one for my book 3 is flexing your funny muscle, is like when and when not to create laughs like a pro.
So the first book is mostly lens and blueprint, right?
Yeah, I say like if being funny was like driving, book 1 is teaching you what a car is, and then book 2 is teaching you how to cruise around town with it, and then book 3 is teaches you when and when not to drive. Yeah, so that's, and then all 3 of those are going to have a class with them, and then that you can get, and then hopefully with this podcast we can start to have conversations with people and show them how to implement, starting with you, how to implement, first of all, how to find your comedy lens, and just take a stab at it, just to begin to figure out what yours is, so that you can start to bring your comedy to the next level. Because if you're already getting laughs, then that means that you're honing in on your lens, like something you've figured out something. And if you're not getting laughs, it might be because you just haven't figured out why you're funny or who you are and what your take is. And so what I've been doing with my coaches, with the people I've been coaching, the comedians I've been coaching, is I have them answer those 4 questions first. And stuck on himself. Okay, so the 4 questions that help you guide towards your own comedy lens. Number 1 is, what personal truths define you? And that is a important one, because what we're trying to do with the comedy lens is we're trying to figure out who you are, and the truths that define you. Like for me, for instance, I'm a man, I'm married, I'm a dad, I'm accused of having Asperger's syndrome, even though I've never been diagnosed. For the longest time, I thought I was neurotypical, and I was very shocked to find out that I'm not. Because that's a typical Aspie thing. I'm normal. I'm very normal. What are you talking about? You're the weird one. I'm 58, so I'm older. I'm aging, or whatever. I live in Texas, but I'm from Cleveland. So you can go on and like, what is it? Personal truths define me. I'm a Buddhist. I'm whatever. I don't drive. I've got a weird eye, so I can't drive. So I'm really anxious for my 14-year-old daughter to turn 16. Or as I like to call her, my driver, my future driver. I need someone to backseat drive, with my one eye. Yeah, my eye. It's weird. My eyes got a weird focus thing happening as I got older. I don't know what happened. So, but that's a truth that defines me. So then, if I begin to admit stuff like that, I can be, and not that I would be like, that wouldn't be a comedy lens for me, but it would be part to begin to discover who I am, to people who don't know me, because you're trying to figure out why you're funny to strangers. And the only thing that's interesting to strangers are these things. To you, or maybe even to your family, they might be sick of hearing about these things. But like if you find out that I collect smushmallows, stuffed animals, it's like, oh, whoa, okay, I wouldn't expected that or something. I don't, but that would be interesting. Then number 2 is like, what topics in life make you laugh? So that's the second question you should ask yourself when you're finding a comedy lens, is what topics in your life are funny to you. Because when you begin to start to think about that as a comedian, you want to sort of emulate that. You're going to be the funniest when you begin to mock the things that you enjoy watching being mocked. So just when you're beginning in this business, you just have to begin to start thinking, well, what do I like? What? So then, the second question you answer, like a few of those things is, and to me, I like to make fun of things I see, family life. I like to make fun of the struggles that happen. Like I like to, since I'm an Aspie, things frustrate me. So all the things that are really frustrating, those things, when I'm in my best mood, do make me laugh, especially in retrospect. When I'm going, remember yesterday when I lost it? That was funny, haha. And my kids are all just like, that wasn't funny at all. It still isn't, and it won't be until we have therapy. So then number 3, how do people describe your humor? And that's the thing, is a lot of us are fooling ourselves, especially when you're beginning to get into comedy. You think you're this one thing, and then you realize you're something totally different. And a lot of times you want to be one thing, but you really are this other thing. A lot of people who are like kind of dad joke, annoying comedy quippers see themselves as like, I'm kind of like a Bill Burr. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not, dude. And your friends and family who are honest with you and still talk to you will tell you that if you let them, if you don't interrupt them and tell them, no, I'm not, I'm Bill Burr.
Also,
I'm
go
very
ask a friend or
like
go ask a family member how they would answer the question, or what.
Yeah, and so you ask the people who know you, how do they describe your humor? And just say, honestly, just describe my humor. Just describe, like, he's silly, he's with me, that oh, like he'll say the thing that everyone else in the room is thinking, but would never have the
No one
nerve
says.
or the decency to say, you
Decency.
know, right? Or they're all too nice to say the thing, and he says it because he's trying to get a laugh. People describe me as very physical. People, they say your face always makes me laugh. When you walk in the room, I just am waiting for that something to to do. And so those tell me something about myself. Those tell me a little bit more about how I'm going to deliver my humor, but still, that's all part of my lens. And then number three, the question is, how do people who know you describe your humor? Did I just do that one? Yes. The number fourth question is, how much pot have you smoked in the last week? Wait a minute, that doesn't say that. When are you at your funniest? So the fourth question is, when are you at your funniest? And so that's a good question to answer, because it helps you figure out, in terms of what kind of show you want to do, like what energy do you want to reflect in that show that's similar to when you are energetically funny elsewhere. So if I'm funniest with my friends, how can I bring that to the stage? If I'm funniest when I'm cutting from the back of the classroom, sort of sarcastic comments that are observing what's happening and interrupting, then I have to develop that sort of thing. If it's when everyone's loud and I'm louder, that's something. If it's I'm funniest when I'm wearing a wig and I'm holding something, I got to know that. I'm funniest when when I'm drunk. Probably not a good idea, because that's going to limit your career. But some guys pretend like they're drunk, and I think Ron White, like pretends like he drinks a whole. I mean, he might really be dead, but there's no way a guy is that funny and that clever and that much of a great joke writer who's a drunk. So it's his character, and so it's what makes him relatable and makes him, really unique, and makes him memorable. Because he's a guy who's having a drink with you while you're but he's like a country storyteller, but he's really good. Anyone that gets to that level is a real clear comedy lens.
Mhm.
So if you answer those four questions, so when somebody comes up to me, and I've put it out to in my book, I was like, email me and hit me up, and I'll try to direct you towards that. So they'll always say, hey, can you help me find my comedy lens? So the first thing I'll say is, answer those four questions. And when you can answer those four questions, I can go over that, and I can cherry pick the adjectives and nouns that describe you. And then I can begin to insert those into a template that I have that begins to assemble you a bit of a comedy lens. And that's just a way to get your very first one, just to begin to see, like the thing that comes closest to describing you right now, knowing it could change, is this comedy lens. And then that gives you a starting point as a new comedian to go, I'm going to try that. And then you begin to write material from that point of view. And then if that material really rings true, then you're onto something. And if it doesn't, you're like, oh, I got to change that lens because it's not really resonating, or it's not broad enough to give me enough of it takes. And that's the process. That's why you write when you're not on stage. You're only on stage for a 5-minute set 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week if you're lucky. So all that other time is what you could be doing. This is the stuff you can be doing that prepares you. It's like the NFL guys that work out all week for that 60-minute game. And this is exactly like football, by the way. It is just as tough. It's just as physically enduring, or rough as any football game you'll ever see. I defy you to prove me wrong. That would be great, right? Then to have a football player like just come by and hit me.
What was appealing to me is about how like the comedy lens actually helps me be more creative. Like there's all sorts of studies. As an economist, I always think about the social science studies, but like they give like people like 20 words, write jokes from these 20 words, and then the other group gets 6 words. And the ones that have a little bit more boundaries or guardrails, they end up having a lot more material. They become more creative, more funny when you do have some guardrails. And I kind of saw the comedy lens as, as joke writing guardrails, where if you have too much material, it can go anywhere in the world. It's like you can't even get started.
And that's where you become that comedy quipper, where it's a generic take. It's funny. And in the book, I show you what that looks like for the I did a Google research on snails. And I said, well, what animal sleeps the longest? It's snails. And they sleep for like 30 days or something. And I said, the joke was, apparently snails can sleep for up to 30 hours. Teenage snails even longer. So that's like, but that's a generic joke, right? That's like, that says nothing about who I am, and but it's cute, it's funny, but then I go in the book, I go through using lenses on. I use Rodney Dangerfield, and I use Jerry Seinfeld, and then I use mine, and I show how each of those can produce a different type of punchline. And like you're saying, it begins to, it's not a guardrail is a good thing in the sense that it keeps you on track. You're on a trip and you're on track, and it tells you where you got to be. And your comedy lens is the same way. Your trip is the 5 minute set or 10 minute set you're doing. And so this says, hey, here's how I'm going to look at this material so that the audience can see my trip, that they can see what my take on this is. Because there's probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or more other people that are doing the same thing before and after me. How do I stand out? How do I get them to want to see me more? How do I get them to pull the waitress over and go, or the waiter over and go, hey, when's that guy coming back? When's that girl coming back? How do I get them afterwards to write down a thing and go, hey, we want to see the economist again. That guy was funny. The professor. Bring back the professor. Because that's how you had a lens that made it stand out, and you gave them something that they want more of, and that's what the real gift of stand-up comedy is you can give an original and, as Seinfeld says, imitatable take that they can't do on their own. And so you give them that, and they can't believe they get to see that, and then they can't believe that there's more of that. And in their mind, you have an endless amount of that because it's so clear of what you're doing. Mitch Hedberg, it feels like he must have 10,000 hours of that material, which he doesn't, and he didn't. But yet he could come up with it, because if you give him enough time. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough time, but he's so brilliant that even in the hotel lobby, he's coming up with material. Like, I guess the story goes that he was trying to rent a car. That's what it was. And he didn't have a credit card, but he had, in his pocket, he had like $5,000 worth of cash. And then he said, I want to rent a car. And he's like, well, you need a credit card. And he's like, but I have money. And he goes, no, he goes, but money is what the credit card represents. I'm taking out the middleman. I'm giving you the thing. But so like, even his mind, the joke was that even like off stage, he's still thinking that way, that his comedy lens does, which is that outside the box take on everything, Yeah, and apparently with Mitch Hedberg, and I didn't watch him as he was developing, but I knew some comedians that did, and the story goes that he at first wasn't that guy. He was doing some of that material, but he hadn't caught on to, like, because he wasn't really a surfer, because he didn't talk about surfing, but he had a real sort of hippie, blonde hair, the glasses, the sunglasses, like kind of like too shy for this whole thing, but I'm the funniest guy in the room, kind of a thing. And he's, hitting you with the most common premises, buying donuts, but then he's taking it in a place where, like, I don't need a receipt. Let's leave paperwork out of this. It's just like a recalibrating of reality that you're not used to. And then you're like, you wish you could go back to the first time you heard his first bit, because you're just like, you're never going to feel that again, where you're like, oh, like the first time I read Grapes of Wrath, I was just like, I'll never feel that coolness again. Like, I got to experience. And then you want to read more Steinbeck, because it's like, I want more of that, please. And that's what you begin to deliver with a comedy lens, is more of that, please. And they come back for it, because it's they like it, and it's clear. And if you, but you find your audience with that too. And you also find people that don't like you. And that's good. Like a good, clear lens. Like Mitch, a lot of people didn't like what Mitch Hedberg was doing, because maybe they're against drugs. Maybe they're older and they don't get it. Maybe they're too young. It's cringe, or whatever. I can't imagine that, but with Hedberg, he's one of my favorites. But anyway, I've learned with doing marketing is sometimes you want to eliminate a certain portion of the populace as being potential audience members, because that means you're very clear on who you do have, and then your fans are more adamant. They're more clear. They're like, I know who this guy is, and I really like him. Well, I really know who he is, and I don't like him. That's fine. Swipe left. There's plenty of people that you'll like. And that's where this also plays in a good comedy lens.
And that sounds like then you shouldn't be disappointed if 40% of the audience isn't with you. That means you are developing more of a narrow lens.
Bill Hicks never was. He walked people all the time, and because but here's the thing though. What a good comedy lens, like someone like Bill Hicks has a real clear comedy lens, but his comedy lens is difficult, because some people don't like that kind of comedy and that kind of thought-provoking show, and a guy who is so really confident with his point and take, and a guy who is really calling out some bullshit about some things that a lot of people hold dear. And a lot of people don't like that, right? And he would walk people. Like I went to see him, and I watched people file out in the back, like, during the course of his show. And he was like, good. If you don't like me, then I'm not going to change what I do. And the guy sold out every show every time because and so to me, that like a clear comedy lens, and you don't want that, because a good comedy lens for most of us brings more people to you, because now they get who you are and why I like you. Because someone like me, accountants and economists might like somebody who's wired the way I'm wired, an Aspie hole. Oh my God, I know people like that at my accounting firm. I know people like that at the school I teach. So a good lens actually gives you a clear picture of who that person is, and unless it's really alienating, it does allow for more people to go, oh, I know someone like that, or I'm like that. I want to hear more about their take on these struggles, because I don't know how to make fun of these struggles. These struggles are getting me down. This person, though, makes me laugh about it. Oh, right. They think just like I do, except better.
When you're trying to develop someone's comedy lens, do they always say like, "Well, I'm a Bill Burr type, I'm a Shane Gillis type"? Did you try to tell them don't compare yourself to a comedian? Do the four
No,
questions. Is that a better method? Or
I, I mean, I like the fact that they're looking at, that means that they're watching comedy. That means they're fans of comedy. That means that they're trying to see the commonality between two different worlds. So all that's good, man. All that's like healthy. So that's cool. What I would argue, though, just in any of those cases, is like, don't be Bill Burr and don't be any of them, because that they are that, that their comedy lens is that, now Bill Burr is a real interesting guy, because Bill Burr, like, he just says the opposite of what we all believe, and then figures out a way to make it make sense, and he's really, so you could do that too. And it doesn't mean you're like Bill Burr. You could have that same goal in your act, and so in that way you would be similar to Bill Burr, but you couldn't, unless you're also from Boston, unless you're also married to an African American woman, and is a father of two kids, and also a recovering alcoholic, and also loves cigars, and also can't grow hair anymore. Like now, those are real things that are real specific to Bill Burr, and we all know about him and love about him because he's vulnerable enough to admit all those things. And Bill Burr is great. He's just like, I got everything going on except for like who I am. I'm just too angry. I get too pissed off. Other than that, I got it. I'm great. So it's a real funny angle that he has. So I would encourage somebody to identify, like, there's parts of me that identify with Steve Martin, with Bill Murray, with Eddie Murphy, with Bob Newhart. There's elements of them all that I wouldn't say stole from them, but reflected truths about how I made people laugh, that when I watch them do it, go, oh my God, there's the best version of that I've ever seen. And so I use that when I'm trying to perfect my take. But I have the good fortune to be able to watch them and watch a bunch of other really good, and combine it all together in this mixed stew called Mike Lucas. And then that creates this thing that people see on stage and go, man, that dude made that guy's front bumper come alive. Holy shit. I want more of that guy. The talking bumper guy.